welcome back to Autism Live, and we apologize to Bonnie Yates because we were running a little bit late, but it's time for Your Rights with the fabulous Bonnie Yates. She's a special education attorney with the law firm of Hirji and Chow here in Southern California. Bonnie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm like looking for my sticky that has my disclaimer on it, which is
well,
not what we want to be doing.
Well, I can help you with a disclaimer too, but I do want to point out first that, as I said, you're with the law firm of Hirji and Chow, and we want to give people the information for Hirji and Chow if they would like to contact you and to know a little bit about what they do.
Yeah, no, I got to get myself together here.
All right, I can do that while you get yourself together. So Hirji and Chow, a wonderful law firm in Southern California that we highly recommend. And you can visit their website, which is lawyer4children.com, and it's the number 4, lawyer4children.com. There's lots of interesting stuff on their website that I promise will be very helpful to you. And you can also, on that website, request that you would like to have a free consultation with the fabulous Bonnie Yates, who is a remarkable special education attorney with lots of experience in this field, and as we talked about last week, is herself a mom of a child who was not a child anymore, but was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. In other words, Bonnie gets it. In a way that I think very few people do, and her entire law firm is superlative. So,
well, it got me, Shannon, right? I didn't get it. It got me.
Same here. I was drafted. Yeah. I did not volunteer. I was drafted into this as well. But you know, the thing that was said to me early on, the dad who showed me card for the first time said, when he found out that I had a child with autism, he said, well, welcome to the club that you never thought you wanted to belong to, but once you get here, you see it's filled with amazing people. And Bonnie, you are one of the amazing people that I met on the way that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Well, and I feel the same way, Shannon. Of course, I had a friend who was a stranger who got on the phone with me at 10 o'clock at night and talked to me in 1994 about her son doing card services. And she said, I know you're really discouraged right now, but there's a lot of really wonderful stuff you can do that'll help your child a lot. This isn't a hopeless situation. And, you know, she's another person I just would like to give a shout out to the moms and dads. She was a dentist. She got retrained. I mean, she got trained in running a home ABA program, and then she went back into doing, I don't think it's high-risk dentistry, but it's like specialty dentistry for kids with autism that are going to come into the appointment and be phobic. And she developed techniques to work with them that didn't require sedation. So that's kind of just like a cool application. And I always figured she was like my sort of autism Eskimo, which means, for those of you that don't know, there's kind of a term in AA where people, the person that brings you to your first AA meeting is like your Eskimo.
Right.
Like, I think that's, you know, I don't quite understand why, but I guess, you know, they got you inside the igloo out of the cold or whatever. So, I mean...
You don't know the Eskimo story?
That's the Eskimo story.
No, there's another Eskimo story, but I'll tell it to you later.
Okay. This is all way more interesting than the disclaimer. But let me tell you why we give you the disclaimer.
Okay.
We give you the disclaimer because the kind of advice we give people in the office is very specific and focused. And when we sit down with people in the office, or if we talk to them on the phone, we will typically ask them for 2 years of documents, their IEPs, district assessments, and any private assessments. And we take a very careful history, and we apply the law and the facts as we know them to each other, and then we try to come up with a solution. And it's a case plan, and it's very specific to that child. So while there are some common things that I will probably always tell everybody, like, if you're serious about this business, you got to get your own assessment by somebody you trust. That might not be true in the 98th case or the 99th case. So on the show here, we're dealing with generalities. And so we're giving you general information that will hopefully help you apply your specific law to your specific facts and figure out what you need to do next. But it's not a substitute for focused legal advice, and that's why we give you the disclaimer, and we make it really easy for you and say, look, if you're in California, we'll even, offer you the opportunity to have that consultation free of charge that I just described, where we look at your documents and we give you a focused legal opinion. So that is an option, but it's not an option on this program. And so when we answer questions, even if they're from specific people, and even if we ask them for more specific information, we're not giving legal advice. So we want you to understand that. And that's the reason attorneys always give the disclaimer, is because after the fact, they don't want to be in a position where somebody comes back and says, you told me to do this and I did it and it worked out awful and look where I am now. We're trying to empower you and make you more independent at these meetings, so that when the district walks in, they can sense that you're not some little down feather that they can, blow up to the ceiling. But we also tell you frequently on this program that although IDEA was supposed to be a program that did not require attorney involvement and parents could represent themselves at IEP meetings and so on, we don't really see anymore that that's the way IDEA is working, because districts don't want to pay attorneys' fees. The whole dispute is about the money. I don't care what they say. And the only way you can cut through the mud, the coffee grounds, is to be able to threaten them with, the cost of a due process hearing. So that's the disclaimer for today.
Okay, I like that disclaimer. So last week, Bonnie, we had some questions and we didn't get through all of them. And we said that one of them in particular was going to lead to a bigger discussion. So I'm just going to wade in. The first question that we had left was
Did we do question 2?
Yes, we did do question 2.
Yeah. So we're on question 3, which is about individualized transition plans.
Yes, and I think that was the one that you felt that there was a larger discussion to be had.
A great question.
You want me to go ahead and read it? Should I read it?
I sent Shannon a goody for you all. It's a very good publication. I didn't write it. It's by Disability Rights of California. It's a nice 25-page booklet that I think is a great piece of standalone information for individualized transition plans in California. So that's something you can pick up after the show, and you can learn more about this. But anyway, we'll give it a start.
So how about if I read the question, or do you want to read it?
You can read the question.
Okay, my daughter is about to be 16 and her IEP is coming up. I heard on the show that she should have a transition plan. She doesn't. Is that something I'm supposed to do, or is it something the school is supposed to do?
Okay. Free, appropriate public education is the responsibility of the district from age 3 to the student's 22nd birthday. Included within that is the individualized transition plan. For the first 10 years of my doing special ed cases, I probably never even saw an individualized transition plan, and that might be shocking to you, but part of it had to do with the fact that I was doing all early intervention cases, young children with autism. And I'm glad that I got to do that, and I'm also glad I got to learn about a lot of other stuff subsequent. Anyway, one day, one of the kids that, I had represented when they were 3 grew up and was a teenager. And all of a sudden, that person had an individualized transition plan. And I didn't understand too much about it, and since then I've had occasion to learn. So I want to share some of my experience about ITPs, as they're called, with you. Now, one of the things that districts don't really like to talk about is that the test for whether somebody needs special education and related services is whether their disability has an educational impact. And the question of what that means is something that has to be considered. It's greater than an academic impact, and we've talked about that on the show before. And IDEA 2004 envisions that students will grow up, and at age 18, they will assume the management of their special education, and that their educational rights will pass to them as 18-year-old adults. Now, some kids are going to be conserved, we know that, but there's a whole lot of people out there now that are young children or early adolescents who have autism and are high functioning, and they are going to live as independent adults. And so for those people, the individualized transition planning process is going to be quite important because they're not going to be conserved by their parents, and they're going to be engaging in their own educational decision making. However, even for students who are conserved, the idea envisions that they're going to work as adults, and the federal and states, the federal statute and California state law assume that the school district has a role in the process of helping students figure out what they're going to do. So the ITP is something that needs to be in place by the 16th birthday. It can be done as early as 14. The reason for having it in place on the 16th birthday is to allow appropriate time to plan for the student reaching majority and exercising his own educational rights. Now, obviously, some students are going to graduate with a high school diploma, and they're going to be out at 18, and they're going to be working on their ITP goals. Some may not leave school until their 22nd birthday, but it will still be appropriate, as you see later in the discussion, for them to be working on their ITP goals. Now, learning about ITPs for me was counterintuitive. I think that's the way I want to put it. And the reason that it's counterintuitive is because I would see something, it would be buried in the IEP, it would be, 75% of the way through the document. It'd be 2 pages long, and it seemed like a boilerplate template that recited some general stuff about education and some general stuff about assessments, like, gee, we gave the student an interest inventory. Didn't seem like there's a whole lot of teeth there. And when I started to think about it, that became concerning because the individualized transition plan is supposed to guide the rest of the person's life as an adult. An idea, as we've discussed, contemplates that students will have an adult life and that they will have a meaningful adult life and they will have some kind of employment. So you're in special ed from age 3 to 22 max. Okay, so that's I can't even do basic math anymore. That's
It's 21 years, right?
18 years, right? 18 years essentially that the district is responsible for you at a maximum. And then you're let's say a 22-year-old adult, and if you're male, the average lifespan is like at least 75 years. So all that time is left for the person. And the ITP document that addresses all of that is a 2-page generic document that's a cut and paste thing. And I don't think much attention is given to this ITP process at all. And from doing some research on the law, I think this is an area in which we need to push the law forward, because I don't think that judges are being insistent that the districts develop meaningful, real, implementable transition plans. So that's kind of my starting point. And then I'm going to tell you about the individualized transition planning process and what kind of plan should result. Okay, one of the things I learned, aside from the fact that the ITP was buried in the IEP document and it was supposed to be very important and sometimes it wasn't being reviewed at all, is that if you really want to have a good ITP meeting, it should not be part of, let's say, your annual IEP. You should have a separate meeting that's devoted solely to inviting the right people and having the discussion about the planning process. So that's something for you to consider, is are you going to have a separate ITP meeting? Whether you do it separately or you do it as part of the ITP that's developed after age 14, what is contemplated is that the school district is going to conduct interest inventory type assessments and write goals to help the student, I'm just going to call it, be constructively employed as an adult. And so that's a very important document. And the assessment, the interest assessment, is supposed to look at the skills and challenges of the person. If the person requires alternate forms of communication for the assessment, that's perfectly permissible. One of the questions for parents is whether or not the student will participate in the ITP meeting or at what stage. I could see a situation where a student would actually be actively involved in the development of the ITP, or I could see a situation where the student would not participate in the ITP process until the ITP was developed. That'll totally depend on where the student is in terms of his ability to participate in that process. But the district's supposed to do career interest surveys and figure out what the student might want to do. I have a lot of criticisms of those interest inventories because, first of all, the ones I've seen by outside professionals, if you get an independent evaluation in the area of transition, they do a much more thorough job. They have a lot more, it seems like, tools in their toolkit. The district seems to do these very preliminary kind of checklist things, and they basically, it seems like they feel that if they get the student in the room for 15 minutes and they ask them some general questions, they've satisfied the process as far as the ITP. So I think that part could be a lot more robust. And I learned in researching this for this program that they are supposed to compile something called a summary of performance transition portfolio. I've never even heard that term before.
Nor have I.
Those of you that are looking at your ITP, let's all start asking for that summary of performance transition portfolio. And you don't have to write this all down. It's all in the goody.
Okay.
It's all outlined in the goody. I'm shamelessly, pirating and paraphrasing their material and combining it with my experience. But so the document that I've given you will assist you greatly in understanding transition services and developing your ITP. So the plan is part one, and you're supposed to have adult goals that are measurable. I've never seen transition goals that are measurable. Documenting what you will study or do, and not everybody's going to study. Some people are going to get a job. Some people are going to work on their independent living skills. So it's going to be targeted to where the individual student is at. And then there need to be annual measurable goals based on the special needs of the student. And then there's also going to be a list of transition activities. So the activities are those things that the student needs to do to meet his goals. So let's say the student has been working in a billing office and they want to learn how to do medical code billing. The transition activity might be, I will take a 6-month university course resulting in a medical coding certification so that I can do medical code billing. That would be one type of instructional service. Let's say the goal is, I want to work at my CVS. I've been doing that since my high school community-based instruction program, but my mom's been driving every day. They've offered me a job, and I need to learn how to take the bus. So you could have a goal that would be a transportation goal that would allow you then to get to work. Or you could say, I'm really interested in starting a catering business, but I need to work on learning how to measure and cook. And I mean, it's kind of it's like it's supposed to be an individualized program based on interests and abilities, and it's supposed to include functional vocational activities.
But Bonnie, I'm going to stop you for just a second to say that as you're saying this, and parents are hearing this, and I can hear them going, does that mean that the school has to provide that instruction or pay for it? Because that's crazy town for a lot of parents. They're like, what, they're going to teach my son how to ride the bus? Who's going to do that?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think schools aren't set up to do that, but legally this is what they're supposed to do, correct?
Right. Yes, they're supposed to participate in the transition process till 22.
Yeah.
And there are, what we call CBI programs, community-based instructional programs in public high schools where they do a lot of, they will do travel training. They will, let's say, go out to lunch and learn how to work with money. Those programs could be really, really good and really, really robust. I think a lot of the time, unfortunately, they're not. But yes, that is the school district's obligation. Now, they're also supposed to provide services to support the transition plan, and typically there's something on the IEP called career guidance, and it's usually no more than 30 minutes a week. But there's no reason that the services have to be limited to that. The services are whatever's necessary to effectuate your transition. Now, as I said, the independent living services could involve shopping or cooking, travel training, how to maintain a household. And all the areas should be identified via a functional evaluation that looks at the strengths and weaknesses and helps the student figure out what their focus area is. So in order to prepare for your ITP, you need to have an agenda, you need to bring questions, and you need to develop the IEP. You'll also have to consent to the transition assessment. And if you get the transition assessment back, which you never do, so it's also interesting to ask for the backup documents, and you feel that the transition assessment was incomplete vis-a-vis how transition is supposed to work, you can ask for an outside transition assessment by an independent evaluator, and there are people that do those evaluations, and I suspect that they're a lot more useful often. The regional center is obviously going to play a role in this once a person is over 22, maybe before, but there's another agency called the Department of Rehabilitation, which is not limited to special education students, that maybe parents have only heard about in the most minimal way. And the Department of Rehabilitation should be invited to participate in the transition planning process, and they should be invited to the ITP. I'm not really going to go into what Department of Rehab does, except for to say that it retrains people for vocational employment. But they can do things like, I mean, we had a client who had a job at a car parts place, and Department of Rehabilitation offered him a counselor that helped support his employment so that if issues came up, they could be navigated successfully. In the goodie that I sent, there's a whole separate link to Department of Rehabilitation with another pamphlet, which I took a look at. So if you want to know what the Department of Rehabilitation is supposed to be doing, it's supposed to be doing a lot. They also talk about the role of regional center in the transition planning process, and certainly those people can be brought into the IEP team meeting. Apparently the standard for DOR services is whether the person has a physical or mental impairment that causes a substantial impediment to employment. So that's their role. And as I said, Regional Center helps with preparation for employment, supported employment, can provide day programs, which are for people that don't have the capacity to work, supported living, and behavior management. And parents don't really know necessarily what's possible, and the regional center is not always good at maybe making that clear to them. But there are people who work in the regional center, and all they do is transition planning. And those people should be resources for parents in the ITP process. And I guess the final thing about all of this is if you get through the whole thing and you don't agree with your ITP, you have a right to go to due process on the ITP just as you do on any other component of the IDEA.
Okay.
So that's an intro to the ITP process.
Fabulous. And for this parent, though, because we've had a lot of parents experience this where they're about to be 16 and no one has mentioned an ITP. Mm-hmm. There isn't one. And so the parent is saying, do I need to initiate this? Is this something that only happens if the parent asks for it?
No, it's supposed to happen automatically by the age of 16, beginning as early as 14. With the booklet that Shannon's going to send to you, I think it'll be really easy to see that all you need to do is write them a letter that says, I understand that this is supposed to be in place for my child by his 16th birthday. His 16th birthday is going to be April 26, 2019. It's now February. I'm concerned about whether the assessment process has been started. I expect to have an IEP on or before his 16th birthday to discuss these services. Please contact me to let me know what we need to do next.
Awesome. But I do want to let parents know that we've been hearing from a lot of people who say, yeah, no, I've never heard of that. The school has not mentioned it to me. I don't see it anywhere. That, unfortunately, that is not uncommon. But again, perfect verbiage that Bonnie just gave you that you can write and say, I'm aware of it, and we need to do that. Spectacular. I think we are essentially out of time, though, Bonnie.
Okay, well, that leaves us at question 4 for next week.
It does.
Question 4, we will answer your question, how do you get to school to provide a one-to-one aid? That'll be at the top of the program next week. But these were super good questions,
Yes.
and certainly allowed me to learn more, which is always my goal. Will you please send more questions for next week so we can have a really interesting show?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and tell us how we can reach here, Gian Chow again.
Okay, our phone number, 310-391-0330, and our website, lawyer4children.com. And I really do appreciate the questions, and will endeavor to answer them thoughtfully, and hope to have some more questions soon.
We do love them, and we appreciate you more than you know, Bonnie. Thank you so much, and thank everybody here, Gian Chow, for us.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, take care.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.